Chapter 12. We work for the government. Straight like that, that's it. That's what your daddy just said in court. How the government is paid and how I participated by helping my father. This guy told on everybody. This guy told on his people, the government. He break down how it's done, who it's done, all of that. He's breaking down how the government was paid in detail. And people want to tell me the government got nothing to do with any of this cartel stuff. They are paid monthly. The commander of the AFI, now Federal Ministry of Police, is paid, who is the one in charge of the entire state. The commanders of the state judicial police, the municipal police, and the PF are paid. The doctor was in charge of this type of thing, and so was Damaso Lopez Nunez. And on our side, or on my dad's side, there's Commander Cordero, who pays the judiciary, and there's Queta, who is the one who looked after those in the PFP, those in the AFI, and the judiciary. Since my dad is always in the mountains, Queta or Cordero would let me know, hey, your monthly payment has arrived. And I would call the guy in charge of my dad's money, the one who has it stashed away. For example, the commander of Culiacan was paid $50,000 a month. The commander of Mazatlan, $30,000 a month. And the PFP officers in Culiacan, Mazatlan, and La Cruz de Elota each received $20,000. What I would do was call Omar, Wee, my boy, and another guy I call Perico. And I would say, hey, go and ask for this much from where the money is stashed and give it to Queta. And when the payment was made to the state or municipal judiciary, I would tell them the same thing. Give that much to Cordero, and I would tell them to write down the amount and date so my dad could keep track of his accounts. The PF and AFI coordinators of Sinaloa, Nayarit, Jalisco, Baja California, Chiapas, and Chetumal are paid. When they change commanders at the plaza, before the one in charge leaves, he himself introduces you to the new one. Doctor and Queta would call me, and I would let my dad know that they had appointed a new commander and that everything was fine. Then my dad or Chapo would see him in person to greet him and put themselves at his orders. And my dad would tell me, I ask you to remind me about the monthly payment, or you give the money to the Doctor or Queta so that they can be paid each month. And that was the part of the job where I helped my dad. That's it. I've heard plenty of parts where you helped him already. Not always, because I would spend 3 or 4 months a year outside of Culiacan. I would go to Mexico City, but I did everything by phone or Nextel. I did meet AFI commanders several times through my dad. When I was with him, he would call them to say hello and introduce them to me. My dad always sees the commanders arriving or changing, and then Doctor or Queta takes care of giving them their monthly allowance. My dad always greets them and chats with them. More as a courtesy from him, I don't know what to call it, but he always sees them. The same mechanism works for the commanders of the state judicial police. They get paid monthly. The funds are given to the director, the deputy director, the director of operations, and the director of each unit. The units are the same as those in each city in the state. For example, they're given to Mazatlan, La Cruz, El Salado, Costa Rica, El Dorado, Escuinapa, El Rosario, Navolato, and Pericos. What I did was call them so they would give the money to Cordero, or sometimes someone else would pay them. My job sometimes was just to pick up the phone, call and say, give so much to so-and-so, and that was it. So for all the expenses, I called them. The PGR has regional delegates and sub-delegates. All the delegates and sub-delegates are friends of my father and Chapo, and everyone else. Every delegate who arrives in Culiacan, if they're not known, is introduced by the outgoing delegate. All of them are friends throughout the country. 99% of the PGR is corrupt. That's it, just 99%. And we give them all the money. Every year or every few months, they rotate throughout the country. But they're the same people and they know each other. And whatever state they go to, they report to whoever's in charge there. If they're in Culiacan, then my father and Chapo give them money. If they move to another state like Tamaulipas, then it's logical that they report to the Zetas or the Gulf Cartel. But there isn't a single official who doesn't take money. All right, these revelations in this case, this was what, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. People still here in 2026 trying to tell me, the government, it's overblown, the government's involvement. Miss me with the bullshit. We give money to the director of the municipal police, the state police, and the federal police. They were given a monthly payment to the commander of the PGR and the PF in Guadalajara. The same thing happens in Nayarit, Sonora, and Baja California. And in those states, they give them money not because my father or Chapo have people, but rather in case a shipment passes through the state or if they need something. I know they gave money to many members of the federal police. I heard this from my father and Chapo. The ones who handled all of that were Doctor and Queta. El Mayo coined two sayings that Garciola heard him say several times. They are the golden rule that has allowed the drug lord to dominate the Mexican drug lord's ranks for half a century without ever having set foot in a jail till 2024. With enough money, anything is possible. That's the first saying. And the government will always have more bullets. There's no point in fighting them. That's the second saying. The cartel's infrastructure is made up of maritime, air, and land resources, as well as human resources, territories, and also corrupt authorities. High-ranking government officials are very important to the drug trafficking infrastructure, Ray said in his testimony before the U.S. court. While Doctor, Queta, and Cordero were responsible for paying most of the bribes at the time, when it came to a top-level official, Mayo directly sent his brother Ray. According to Ray, who was an integral part of the Sinaloa cartel for years, the apparatus of corrupt officials who collect money year after year to protect the cartel was part of the assets of his criminal enterprise. These politicians in his pockets, like so many nickels and dimes. The higher the public official being bribed, the more valuable and more useful the asset. During the administration of Vicente Fox and Felipe Calderon, El Mayo, El Chapo, and the Beltran-Leyva brothers reached the highest levels. Bribes spilled over into everyone. For example, during the Fox administration, Genaro Garcia Luna, head of the AFI, received $3 million in bribes from El Mayo. Ray personally handed them over. The objective was, among other things, to have Norberto Vigueras Beltran appointed as regional head of the AFI in Culiacan. El Mayo got what he wanted. Vigueras Beltran, who had worked for the AFI, formerly the Judicial Police, since 1986, was based in Hidalgo. During Garcia Luna's administration, he was transferred as regional chief to Culiacan, where he served from 2003 to 2006. Ray said that El Mayo wanted him there because he had him in his pocket. He was then sent to become regional chief of the AFI in Durango, another territory of El Mayo and the Sinaloa cartel, where he served from 2006 to 2011. In October 2019, Vigueras Beltran was appointed Secretary of Public Security in Cuernavaca. They're that enthralled in the business that I could be the man. And I could just say, hey, man, I want my boy. You put my boy in that position right there. Here's the monies. But if you let the Mexican government tell it, they say, hey, nothing to see here. During his tenure at the AFI, Garcia Luna and his closest team of collaborators, Luis Cardenas Palomino, here we go with the 5 names, y'all. Francisco Javier Garza Palacios, Facundo Rosas. Come on, don't give me extra names if they're the same name. You got to stop. Edgar Milan Gomez, Roberto Velasco, Armando Espinoza de Benito, Igor Labastida, Luis Manuel Becerril Mina, Geraldo Garay Cadena, Ramon Pequeño, among others, were singled out in the Internal Affairs Unit of the PGR for corruption and links to the Sinaloa cartel. Everybody had a job. It seems like you couldn't be a politician without, getting you a job with the Sinaloa cartel. It's a prerequisite for your campaign. Garcia Luna and his people took bribes. During the Sinaloa cartel's biggest war against the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas, the AFI served as an armed wing of El Mayo, El Chapo, and Arturo Beltran-Leyva on more than one occasion. Right? They got everybody's police as their soldiers. During Felipe Calderon's administration, the president himself received millions of dollars in bribes while publicly declaring he was waging a war against drug traffickers in Mexico. He allegedly received money from the Mayo and Beltran-Leyva gangs, according to a confession made to the United States government by drug trafficker Alex Cifuentes, a close associate of both groups. This was uncomfortably aired in the public eye during Chapo's trial in New York in 2018 and 2019, although Calderón said it was untrue. The U.S. government did not deny the accusations because it comes directly from one of the Justice Department's most important cooperating witnesses. In 2012, Edgar Valdez Villarreal publicly stated that President Calderón had even chaired meetings with drug traffickers to reach agreements. All right, for those that don't know who Edgar Valdez Villarreal is, that is the infamous La Barbie. And he let it be known that El Presidente was sitting down having meetings with drug traffickers. Ray told the U.S. government that in 2007 he directly handed over $5 million in cash to Garcia Luna. The higher the rank, the higher the payment. And he asserted that Garcia Luna himself accepted $50 million from Arturo Beltrán Leiva, La Barbie, and his partner, Jose Geraldo Alvarez, El Indio. At the other level of federal officials in various institutions, Ray confessed to spending nearly $300,000 a month on bribes. But when it came to a high-ranking director of the Attorney General's office or an Army general, the payments amounted to $500,000 each. Now, this is just them telling how whatever amount of years this was. These people are introducing the cartels to the person that's taking over their job next, and so on and so forth. The war against the cartels only interrupts people's kickbacks. It only interrupts that extra check that people been getting from family member to family member down the line throughout these positions, these police positions, these attorney general positions, these presidential positions. Same with the United States of America. These people been getting these kickbacks for generations. They don't want those kickbacks, those bonuses that they've been getting for 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years to not show up no more. Because if that happens, then what are they? They're just like everybody else. They're just like you and me. These weren't just in vain payments. The dirty money fueled the effective collaboration between the police and the Sinaloa cartel. The assets of the SSP and the PF, as Ray called them, provided useful services. They not only helped fight the Zetas during the war against them, but also moved drugs both through Mexico City International Airport and overland. They not only helped fight the Zetas during the war against them, but also moved drugs both through Mexico City International Airport and overland. Alex Cifuentes, the Colombian drug trafficker close to El Mayo, said that the Sinaloa cartel once sent suitcases loaded with cocaine on a commercial flight from Argentina to Mexico. The federal police recovered the suitcases at the airport. To be sure, they sent him photos of the suitcases they were supposed to search for, in case they brought the wrong one. In the end, Garcia Luna's SSP and the PF became so closely linked to the Sinaloa cartel that they even became clients. Yes, they bought drugs from them, which the PF commanders themselves then sold on their own. Everybody was catching a piece. Everybody was catching a payday. Period. Point blank. Cifuentes commented that the servile SSP personnel provided the services of retrieving suitcases and selling drugs not only to him, but also to Barbie. Garciolo told me that during Vicente Fox's 6-year term, collusion with the Sinaloa cartel had various facets, but the one he learned about from Vicentillo was regarding the children of First Lady Marta Sahajun. Marta Sahajun's sons controlled all the customs offices and sold the precursor chemical pseudoephedrine to the cartel to produce methamphetamine. Zenli Yegon's money belonged to them, Garciolo told me. He also asserted that Vicentillo spoke directly about this matter with the DEA at the agency's request in 2011 and 2012. Of course he did. Although it was not the first time that Sahajun's sons were linked to Zenle Yegon, it was the first time that someone directly linked to the cartel confirmed it to the United States government. Malta's children didn't know what to do with the money. Basements were full of bills, the lawyer added. emphasizing their veracity. During Fox's administration, his wife's children were accused of multiple acts of corruption. They've gone unpunished in Mexico, but in the United States, in the Southern District Court of California, a criminal case was opened in 2008 against Manuel Bribiesca Sahajun for posing as the owner of a gas company, and an arrest warrant was issued for him. In 2012, Manuel appeared in the court and pleaded guilty. He didn't have many options. The person on his tail was the tough prosecutor, Laura E. Duffy, who happened to be an expert in drug trafficking. Maybe. The case of Chinese-born pharmaceutical entrepreneur Zhenli Yegon crossed the borders of the bazaar in March 2007. The Attorney General's office searched a residence in a luxurious residential development in Lomas de Chapultepec, Mexico City, and found cubic meters of bills totaling $205 million, 17 million pesos, and 11 centenary coins, according to the government of Felipe Calderón. Zhenli Yegon was in the United States at the time, where he stated that members of the PAN, National Action Party, the party to which Fox and his wife belonged to, had threatened to kill him. He specifically accused Javier Lozano, Secretary of Labor, in 2007 of telling him the famous "cooperate or neck." Maybe something was lost in the translation there. I'm thinking it means, get down or lay down. Yegon was arrested the same year in Maryland. He was accused of importing pseudoephedrine, which was then delivered to drug cartels for the manufacture of methamphetamine. His case was dismissed in a U.S. court, and he was extradited to Mexico in 2016, where he is in prison awaiting trial. If I report the names of the politicians one by one, it is not good for me because I face extradition, and if I return, they will make me suffer a lot, said the businessman in 2015. In September 2019, Juan Luis Gomez, the Chinese businessman's lawyer, revealed that it was not $205 million, but $275 million, in addition to the fact that there were gold bars that were stolen from the house during the search, and that the government of Felipe Calderón never presented to the PGR. Of course not. Vicentillo revealed many of the names of Garcia Luna's people who were in the service of the Sinaloa cartel, Garciolo said. I don't think anybody, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think anybody thus far, and I mean thus far by saying anybody that has already gone through their arrest, their cooperation, their sentence, has gone home, I don't think anybody's told on as many people. And I don't know how many people he told on in a courtroom. But in this book, Vicentillo got to be the most prolific cooperating snitch I've ever heard as far as the cartel world goes, because this is pretty in-depth so far. As far as just the vastness of people at the highest level listed. You know what I mean? Like, god damn. Vicentillo revealed many of the names of Garcia Luna's people who were in the service of the Sinaloa cartel, Garciolo said. Police Chief Armando Espinosa de Benito revealed that Mayo's son was the contact between the DEA and the federal police. He personally heard about him hundreds of times in conversations between El Mayo and El Chapo. Damaso was the contact between the police officer and the cartel. He knew that Geraldo Garay Cadena, the federal police commissioner in 2009, had contacts with El Mayo. When the war with the Beltran Leyva family broke out, Gary himself sent El Mayo a recording to prove that Beltran had tried to kill him for the services he provided to the kingpin. Recordings of intercepted phone calls were sent to Culiacan, Garciola said. In them, Mochomo's voice could be heard trying to calm them down so they wouldn't kill Gary. We later learned that Gary was also receiving money from the Beltrans. The person in charge of paying bribes to Gary Cadena on behalf of Mayo was El Estudiante, who also paid bribes to other high-ranking officials. The Sinaloa cartel's payment structure was a cascade that ran from the top to bottom. Ray explained that the targets of the bribes were very clear. If we're talking about the states, primarily the governor and the attorney general, the director of the judicial police, the director of the state and municipal police. At the national level, the attorney general of the republic, and for the different departments of the PGR, the federal police, and the SAIDO. During the time I was working for the cartel, this was the most important intelligence and operations group of the PGR. Miles' brother explained that most corrupt officials prefer to be paid in dollars, baby. Cash is king with these demons. In 2015, Gasiola explained to me that many of the Sinaloa cartel's agreements with the executive branch were established during pre-campaign or electoral campaigns. The lawyer pointed out that the cartel regularly financed the political campaigns of various gubernatorial and mayoral candidates, including those from different political parties, because no matter who won, the organization never lost. Gasiola claimed that in 2010, the Sinaloa cartel supported the campaign of Mario Lopez Valdez, Maloba, the PAN-PRD Convergencia coalition candidate for governor of Sinaloa. At that time, the PRI candidate was Jesus Vizcarra, a close friend of El Mayo, owner of Su Carne, Secretary of Economy of Sinaloa from 2005 to 2006, and mayor of Culiacan from 2007 to 2010. Maloba won the election, becoming the first governor from a party other than the PRI in the state's history, and led the cartel's headquarters from 2011 to 2016. The new governor appointed the sons of two former PRI governors, Juan S. Milan and Francisco Labastida Ochoa, to key cabinet positions. He appointed Oscar Felix Ochoa, nephew of Manuel Torres Felix, the Mayo's father-in-law, as Undersecretary of Agriculture, as his daughter, Elameli Torres Acosta, was married to Serafín Zambada Ortiz. El Mayo's main legal business in Sinaloa is relegated to agriculture and livestock. Maloba also appointed Jesus Aguilar Iniguez, affectionately known within the Sinaloa cartel as commander of the ministerial police in Culiacan, Chuy. Chuy had already held the position in Milan's administration, and El Mayo requested that Chuy be there, Gasiola told me. Based on his conversations with Vicentillo, he held the position from 2011 to 2016. On April 29, 2017, the wedding of Doris Antonia Aguilar, daughter of Chuy Toño, was celebrated in Culiacan. Toñita, as she is known, had worked in the civil registry of Mazatlan, another Mayo territory, while her father had been police chief. As if she were a celebrity, the event was attended by everyone from former Governor Antonio Toledo Corro, accused in 1986 DEA reports of protecting the Sinaloa cartel, to former State Secretary of Public Security Genaro Garcia Castro and former Secretary of Government Geraldo Vargas Landeros, who was the best man. In the end, Maloba could not be missed, who did not attend the mass, but did attend the joyful celebration. I paid a lot of police officers in the state of Sinaloa, and I had friends who were in the military, in the federal police, in the PGR. Commanders of the state judicial police, municipal police, the directors of public forces. These payments were made to receive protection for us. I mean, for my father, for my friend Chapo, for me, for people from the Sinaloa cartel. They gave us information about any police operations in the state and when we received shipments so they would be safe. Often, at the end of the month, my dad would send an extra gift when a shipment of cocaine arrived safely in Culiacan. For the federal police, we had the code name Los Azules, the Blues. Yankee was the PGR commander in each state. We called the military Zapatones, or Zapatones, shoes. In the judicial police of the state of Sinaloa, there were many commanders who protected the Sinaloa cartel. In fact, they were in those positions because of my father. They protect him. They look out for him. One was Chuy Toño, Jesus Antonio Aguilar Iniguez. He was a close friend of my father. He was in charge of the entire judicial police of the state of Sinaloa. He provided us with information and protection regarding any police operations in the state. I had meetings with him and my father. My father told him he wanted them to locate friendly commanders he knew in the areas where he was operating. El Salado, Costa Rica, El Dorado, Cruz de Lota, the area where El Mayo has his refuge and economic assets. If there was any information, if there was an operation against my father in those areas, then the judicial police commanders would notify us. The monthly payment was, however, more than $1 million. Cable bill, light bill, $1 million worth of protection. And that's just one level of protection. That's just local protection. That's state protection. That ain't even the federal payroll. In one of his encounters with El Mayo, one night, Gasiola was able to learn exactly how his system of corruption works, with the precision of the Da Vinci surgical robot. It was one of the many roads leading west of Culiacan. El Mayo was traveling with a handful of his escorts. They traveled in ordinary vehicles with no armor, as they considered the area to be hot. Suddenly, and without the slightest warning, they came across a military checkpoint. At least that's what it looked like, judging by the type of uniforms and weapons the officers were carrying. This is something we've heard the Flores twins say on this channel, or the internet seems to think that these bosses roll around with bulletproofs and military vehicles all the time. Sometimes it's just a couple of them in a Toyota Corolla, staying low key. In reality, they were members of a special anti-kidnapping group of the state police. They were equipped and trained militarily. And Mayo's convoy had the checkpoint in front of them and a group guarding to the rear to block escape routes. The escort chief immediately made a decision and got out of his car, leaving El Mayo on board. He advanced on foot toward the checkpoint and confronted the militarized group. When the head of the escort recounted the incident later, laughing, he said he thought to himself that it was going to be the end of his life. These Sardinians are going to beat the shit out of me. When he reached the checkpoint, he breathed a sigh of relief. He realized they were police officers. He asked to speak to the commander and explained that he was unarmed, demonstrating this by lifting his shirt over his bulging belly. He waited for a reply. After a very long silence, a man took a few steps forward, removed his balaclava, and asked him, "What do you want?" The fat man, still with his shirt up, but more calmly, asked him who he was and who he worked for. The officer replied that he was the group commander. Suddenly, the head of the escort remembered that this individual was in charge of 300 armed men trained in military tactics. He also remembered that the commander, up to that point, had not been the property of enemy groups. The head of the escort immediately confessed to the commander that El Mayo Zambada was in the convoy they had just stopped. Surprised and uncomfortable with the situation, the commander told him that he wasn't the one they were looking for. Yeah, no shit. To avoid future problems, they agreed that El Mayo's men would give the commander a radio so he could communicate directly with them and warn him in advance if they were going to enter his area of operation. The commander didn't want any trouble with El Mayo or El Chapo. He wasn't a police officer in their pay, but simply wanted the freedom to do his job without any major surprises or setbacks. See, he was tough with his balaclava on. He was tough walking up to the escort. Till the escort said, "Oh yeah, guess who I got in the backseat?" That dude didn't want, he wanted no problems. The mutually beneficial agreement was made right there, that day, which could have been the last in his career as a drug trafficker. It was just another day in Mayo's work. Without hugs or handshakes, the head of the escort returned to Mayo's car, and the checkpoint opened to allow them to continue on their way without further incident. All of this, Gasiola recalled, was achieved thanks to the swift and reasoned intervention of the head of the bodyguards, combined with the intelligence on police and enemy operations in the area. A misguided analyst might claim that El Mayo's head of bodyguards is simply another hitman for the Sinaloa cartel, but no. And that's why this man is the head of the bodyguards. El Mayo chooses his people carefully. That's why he enjoys his freedom until this day. About 4 years after this book was published, that freedom was no more. Many military personnel also received money. I know this because I met Mr. Carlos. I met him in Culiacan through a friend of mine. And he said he wanted to meet me or my father because he had many friends in the military with whom he could talk. He said the military personnel wanted to make a deal with my father, since they were going to be the ones on the streets carrying out the operations, and they didn't want to make deals with anyone else, only with my father, because of his personality and the kind of person he is. The military wanted my father and Chapo to work with them to help them with the Zetas, with Arturo and Vicente Carillo, because they were the ones who had the country in chaos. And they knew that my father and Chapo, were different people. I took Mr. Carlos to my father and they spoke. Mr. Carlos was the one who had contact with the military. I sometimes received orders from my father to give Mr. Carlos money to make deals with the military. I say this because on one occasion, 2008, a major or captain from the state of Chiapas was in Culiacan, and they introduced him to my father. That way, we were able to verify that Mr. Carlos wasn't lying and wasn't stealing the money. But it was also difficult to contact my father when he was in the mountains. I informed him, and my father asked me why I didn't meet with them so Mr. Carlos could see that we were looking after them and that we trusted him. That's why we met with them. There were 2 soldiers there, and they told me they were stationed in the state of Chiapas, in Comitán, which was the name of the city. They said they were available for whatever my father needed. They asked me if we could help them with the Zetas, because they knew they were there and that they were kidnapping, robbing, and murdering people. And the soldiers wanted to know if we had the addresses of their safe houses and ranches in Chiapas so they could catch them. I told my father, and he said okay, that he would help capture the Zetas with everything they needed. Miss me with the snitching, miss me with the picking, miss me with the choosing. They are handing out addresses to police and military, and everybody gets help. Okay, it's all a blurred line. The police ain't the police, the military ain't the military, the cartel ain't the cartel. They are all one big amalgamated group of desperate do-anythings, say-anythings, sell anyone as people. My father told me to tell Mr. Carlos to introduce them to Marcos, one of my father's men in Chiapas, so the military could have direct contact with him so he could pay them and help them capture the Zetas. They established contact. Likewise, a month before I was arrested, Licenciado Carlos introduced my father to a major from Durango who was in Santiago, Papasquiaro. The entire territory where Felipe Cabrera Sarabia's ranch was located was under his control. And since my father was there, he wanted to see if Licenciado Carlos could take charge of that. That is, enlist the services of the soldiers. Licenciado Carlos said yes, that he knew the major, and he went to see the major and introduced him to one of Felipe's brothers so they could have direct contact and notify Felipe about everything. If there was an operation or if something was happening in the area where my father and Felipe were. My father once went to Culiacan because Licenciado Carlos told him he wanted to introduce him to a general and that he didn't want to see anyone except him. My father agreed, and that's how he met the general. I was with him at the meeting. No one else could see the general, just me, Casillas, his driver, and my father's secretary, so he wouldn't be alone. The meeting was in the morning at 9:30 a.m. The general traveled on a commercial flight from Mexico City and returned the same day. Mr. Carlos went to the agreed-upon location in Culiacan. The general arrived accompanied by 3 men dressed as military personnel. They entered, and Mr. Carlos introduced them to my father. The general was a man in his 70s, white, and a little overweight. He introduced himself and gave his name. My father called me and introduced me to the general. The general introduced 2 other people. One was a captain, and the other didn't give his rank, but they were sort of general's bodyguards. They began chatting with my father in our living room. We stepped aside. What I heard was that he was a chief in the Ministry of National Defense. Afterwards, my father and he had breakfast together, and that's when my father invited me to sit with them at the table. The general, with whom Mayo and Vicentillo had breakfast, was Humberto Eduardo Antimo Miranda, who held the position of chief officer of the Sedena, National Army, during Felipe Calderón's 6-year term. The Secretary of Defense was Guillermo Galván Galván, who would later send his own emissary to Mayo. According to Vicentillo, and Mayo paid General Antimo a bribe of $50,000 a month. The general has publicly denied any involvement with the Sinaloa cartel. Sure, Right. Of course not. You was getting 50,000 a month. How many of these politicians, generals, soldiers, cops, who saw justice here? Huh? How many of these dudes got away with murder in the truest sense of the words? I also know a lieutenant colonel. You know a little bit of everybody getting paid, bro. I'm sure you're going to tell us about him. I met him through my father in Culiacan. I went to see my father one afternoon, and while I was with him, he told me he was going to see someone and didn't want anyone there. He wanted the person to go directly to a room in the house when he arrived, and that only his secretary, Casillas, would remain in case he needed anything, and that I could stay, of course. That there was no problem with me. I told him I'd better go, that it was for the best, but I knew he wasn't going to accept it because I'm his son, and there would be no problem with me staying. My father was going to introduce me to him for anything I needed, and that's when my father told me he was a member of the army who was working in Culiacan at the time in the 4th Military Zone, and that his friend Alfredo Beltran was going to introduce him. This was before Alfredo's arrest, and of course, at that time, there was no enmity with Arturo. At that time, they were all friends, and that's when Alfredo arrived with the man dressed in military uniform. They went in, and Alfredo introduced him to my father. Alfredo greeted us and said to my father, "Compadre, I'll leave the man here. I'm going so you can talk. You can send him back wherever he tells you to." Alfredo said goodbye and left. The man stayed. He said he was a lieutenant colonel, that he was there in Culiacan and had been hoping to meet my father for a long time, but hadn't found a way. It was a pleasure to see him and meet him. The soldier and my father became friends and became compadres. At least that's what they called each other. A lot of these guys called each other that. It wasn't real. Because it hadn't been possible to become compadres as it should be in a church. But that's what they called each other. A month before I was arrested, I learned that he'd been sent to Sonoita, Sonora to command the regiment. My father contacted him. One day, while I was talking to him, he handed me the phone to say hello. I called him uncle as code, and he called me nephew. My father contacted him so Gonzalo could see him in Sonoita, and so the regiment commander could help him with whatever he needed to receive the marijuana my father and Chapo were going to smuggle across the border. And that's how things worked until the day I was arrested. As much as you told, I'm wondering if you knew you were going to get arrested. Mr. Carlos also introduced the colonel to Marcos. I don't know the colonel's name, but I know he was in Cancun, Quintana Roo at the time. My father ordered him to be introduced to Marcos because he was responsible for Chetumal and the entire southern region. I know that the colonel received money from my father. Think so? Mr. Carlos was in charge of overseeing many of the military personnel. When there were operations in Culiacan, there was always someone to provide information, and whenever someone new arrived, they would introduce him. He would notify us, he would give him the money for the military personnel each month, depending on how long they were staying in Culiacan. Most were sergeants or captains, and they were given $10,000 a month, while the low-ranking ones received $5,000. My father would tell them when he was speaking personally or when he was sending someone on his behalf, as in the case of Licenciado Carlos. The agreement was that the military would tell him where they were going to be, where they were going to conduct searches, and where they were going to set up checkpoints. He wasn't going to ask for more information. He wasn't going to ask for the impossible. They were just to let him know, and we were to move and get out of there. Just because he was giving them money didn't mean they were going to do whatever he wanted. Licenciado Carlos didn't want problems with the government, and that's what my father always said. That's the kind of arrangement my father has always had with the government. Didn't want no problems. Gonzalo, Macho Prieto, had another person working with him named Sergio. At least that's how he was introduced to me. I don't know if that's his real name. He was an army lieutenant, and he also made agreements with other lieutenants and sergeants he and I knew. They participated in the operations, and it was the same. They let us know when and in what parts of the city they would be patrolling or setting up checkpoints, so we wouldn't pass through the area and be detained at a checkpoint. That was the agreement, and that's why they had to warn us beforehand, because they wouldn't be able to do anything if any of us were detained at a checkpoint. And Sergio was close to Gonzalo and was in charge of the agreements with the military. When the time came for war with the Beltran labor gangs, El Mayo and El Chapo had to increase their payments to the army. Alex Cifuentes said that El Chapo paid at least $10 to $12 million to soldiers to capture his cousin Arturo, dead or alive. Paying bribes to various public officials from the president on down has become so costly that El Mayo has complained that he actually works for the government after all. Papa, you created that monster. You created that generational wealth that these people expect to continue getting. I wonder who's cutting their checks now. Or are those checks getting burnt up in this war? So is the protection getting burnt up in this war? Who's still getting paid? That's what I want to know. One day, Felipe Cabrera told my dad that he had clients in Chicago to whom he sold marijuana. They had always asked him for cocaine, but he, Felipe, didn't have any way to send them cocaine, and my dad told him yes, that he would send it, that he too, that is my dad, hadn't sent cocaine to the United States for a long time, but that he wanted to send a ton to earn a little more because he barely had enough to pay the government. Those were my dad's words. We work for the government. They bring us here on the run, and on top of that, we work for them. And that's what they agreed on. Felipe would help him in Chicago, and Germán, Magaña Pasos, would cross paths with him and bring him to Chicago to give to Felipe. And Felipe and Germán contacted each other so they could do everything necessary. And I know this because I gave Felipe Germán's phone number, as my dad told me to connect Germán with Felipe so they could communicate and avoid me having to be a liaison between the two. My dad decided to send cocaine to the United States because he'd run out of people to buy it from in Culiacán. At the end of 2007, Mario Aguirre, one of his buyers, was killed, and in January 2009, Lamberto Verdugo, who were my dad's two closest associates, was killed. The army killed them both, and the only ones who bought from him there in Culiacán were Germán and Juancho, but not as much as Lamberto and Mario did. That's why Felipe offered to help him. So he found himself in a position where his main guys had got sent to the upper room and were murdered. He needed something new, because, listen, slow business, no business, whatever. Have them police's money, have those soldiers' money, because shit gonna go left quick. And it seems like Mayo created a hefty little bill for himself on a monthly basis with these officers. Again, another list of people that worked for Mayo. We've learned absolutely nothing about Vicentillo as far as who he is as a human being, as a person, as a man. We haven't heard any stories of the betrayals and of this, that, or the other. All we've heard is lists of people, what they got paid, and the job descriptions. That's it. That's what this book is. Anabel seems to take a lot of credit for this, but this was easy work for her. She just had to throw his list in there. Chapter 13, The Empire. El Mayo has dairy farms in the names of many people. He owns many houses, many legitimate businesses. They have legitimate income. If the drug business were to end tomorrow, they would still be multimillionaires for generations to come. Fernando Garciola told me about the Sinaloa cartel's leaders' legitimate businesses. He could have stopped paying all of that and just, lived a normal millionaire life, but he wanted that billionaire life, you know what I mean? Greed is greed. Power is power. Abuse is abuse. It is what it is. He has a lot of cattle, tomatoes, beans, construction companies, auto repair shops, gas stations, and hotels throughout his area of influence. Sinaloa, Jalisco, Quintana Roo, Chiapas, Oaxaca. For years, he created a cover-up financial structure. The drug lord's passion was not only finding new and better ways to traffic drugs, but also cattle farming. He's in love with cows, Garciola told me, explaining that El Mayo always speaks proudly of his thousands of head of premium cattle, useful for both meat and milk products. Nothing has been seized from him, Garciola said, despite the fact that the U.S. government has identified several of his livestock companies, such as Nueva Industria Ganadera de Culiacán and Establo Puerto Rico. He has been working legally in Mexico for years. He has even received government subsidies. He get it back somehow, some way, shape, or form. He go get it back. Right? The government threw him a bone. Just as he built a criminal enterprise spanning several countries, he has also built an empire of legitimate businesses, of which the livestock and agricultural segment is the one he most enjoys and personally tends to. The man has a triple personality: a fierce boss who dictates who lives and who dies in the Sinaloa cartel, a businessman who rubs shoulders with important businessmen, and a farmer. He's not losing sleep over the fact that criminal charges have been filed against him from the south to north to the east to the west across the United States. He's been in the Northern District of Illinois along with Vicentillo since 2009, in the Eastern District of New York along with El Chapo, and another in the Western District of Texas since 2012. The most recent is in the Southern District of California, dating back to 2014. Perhaps he's relying on his eternal good fortune. The first criminal charges date back to 1997, opened in the Eastern District of Arizona, where he was accused of marijuana and cocaine trafficking. An arrest warrant was issued against him that was never executed, and in 2001, the charges were inexplicably dismissed. His accomplice, Raul Palacios Barreda, wasn't so lucky. He was arrested and sentenced to 11 years in prison. How convenient. Mayo didn't get popped off for that, but his homeboy did. Using various false names, Ismael Zambada Garcia passed himself off as a prominent cattle rancher. He was. He called himself Jerónimo López Landeros. Javier Hernández Garcia, Ismael Mario Zambada Garcia, Mario Ismael Zambada Garcia, Jesus Loíza Avendaño, and Ismael Higuera Renteria. Mayo never stopped being a farmer, Gasiola commented. He loves the countryside. He loves getting his hands dirty in the soil, and he spends hours exploring his crops and harvesting legal vegetables. His legal businesses in Sinaloa, particularly agricultural ones, span a vast area of nearly 4,700 kilometers and include primarily the municipality of Culiacán, particularly the municipalities of El Salado, where the El Alamo Ranch, his birthplace, is located, Quila, Costa Rica, and El Dorado, and the municipalities of Mazatlan and Elota. He also has businesses in Baja California, Sonora, and Guadalajara. The network of companies linked to Mayo is like a Matryoshka doll. Like a Russian doll, many more arise from a single company, one after the other, through shareholders, directors, commissioners, and legal representatives. The same public notaries constantly create many of the new companies. All right, them Russian dolls. You remember those Russian dolls from, there's another. You open that one up, there's another. That's this cartel business right here. Same shit. The companies have diverse objectives: freight transport, construction, dairy industry, agriculture and livestock, public and private works, real estate development, gas stations, schools, daycare centers, import and export of refrigeration equipment and appliances, mechanical workshops, manufacturing, distribution, and sale of all types of footwear, accessories, lingerie, perfumes, and clothing in general, etc. The old man has his hands in a million businesses, all making legit money. So even he is not exempt to the quest for more power. Money wasn't enough. Having a family he could feed wasn't enough. More power. Some of these companies have managed to legitimize themselves by using public resources or subsidies, obviously not because they lack money, and by participating in government-funded events. The United States government has identified some, while others have remained under its radar. Gasiola gave me access to meeting minutes, articles of incorporation, and contracts, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. In none of the documents written by Vicentillo does he mention his father's business network. Of course not. In the few lines he devoted to the subject, he defended his mother, saying that she had been formally divorced from his father for many years, and that therefore no one should bother her or her property. Right. It's called the loophole, Papa. You was playing the game. All right? You was trying to protect her assets. The weak point of his argument was that Chaito, who constantly identifies herself as a housewife and a single woman before the notaries where she deals with the companies, has no way of justifying the origin of the multi-million-dollar capital injections she's received in some of the companies. AKA miss me with the housewife talk, miss me with the single woman talk. You're getting millions and millions of dollars. Where's it coming from? In Italy, one of the countries with the most advanced laws against the mafia, money laundering, and organized crime, no mobster would place properties in the name of a family member, as the law automatically considers them part of a criminal financial network. In the same way as the United States Treasury Department. This is especially true if the wife and children, who appear to be as partners, have no financial support other than that from the mobster. And although after several years, there's almost no trace of the illegal money with which the company was created, it is still marked by its origin and the presumption that it could continue to launder money. Studying the complex Italian investigative system, public prosecutors and prosecutors, once they locate a company with clear mafia ties, especially evident if it's the family's own, investigate the links between the primary company and any other company, tracing the names of partners, commissioners, directors, administrators, and legal representatives, since it's common for those mobsters to use the same network that provides security and could appear anonymous. This produces a cascade effect that allows for a thorough investigation of each of the secondary companies, even reaching tertiary companies, triggering a new cascade of linked companies. Again, the Russian doll, one inside of another, inside of another, inside of another. This method makes Italy one of the most efficient states in confiscating resources from the mafia, criminal organizations, and money laundering companies. It's so efficient that many mobsters prefer to move their investments to other countries. In keeping with the mafia's behavioral patterns, they often seek out not only ordinary partners, but also large, publicly traded companies which might be less suspicious. Using as a starting point the names of the companies, partners, representatives, directors, administrators, and notaries identified by the United States government since 2007 as belonging to the Mayo drug trafficking network, I found more than 40 associated companies. The primary companies are New Cattle Industry of Culiacan, 1988, JYM Auto Transport, 1996, Javis Multi Services, 1998, Puerto Rico Stable, 2000, Hamaro Constructors, 2001, Las Animas Cattle Ranch, 2001, Niño Feliz Children's Daycare Center, 2001, Zarca de Occidente, 2001, Zarca de Mexico, 2004, Altata Racetrack, 2001, Art and Design of Culiacan, 2000, Frizaza, 2002. In all of them, they are clearly registered as family partners of the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, including Vicentillo, his wife, and his children. But leave us out of it. Come on, bruh. Cut the bullshit. Talk about in too deep. The man had enough companies to mind his business, but that wasn't the way it was going to go down for him. So basically, you can't touch anything or couldn't touch anything between 1988 and 2024 without him being involved, some way, shape, form, or fashion. Aztec College of Culiacan, Construmal Moles and Granite, El Chamuco Marketing, Constructions of the Coast, Armadillo International Commerce, among many others. The notaries in Sinaloa most helped by the Mayo family are number 81, Jose Antonio Núñez Bedoya, number 116, Matias Santiago Astengo Verdugo, and number 79, Humberto Alfonso Balboa Valenzuela. No one in Sinaloa works without the permission of the mayor, Gasiola stated. It seems to me Mayo was the mayor, the governor, el presidente, the police. He was all of it. They've been saying for a while that Mayo's going to retire, that he's sick. He doesn't want to talk to me about it. There are no signs of any serious illness. He still sends for girls all the time, the lawyer quipped. Yeah? What kind of girls he sending for, Gasiola? How old were the girls he was sending for, Gasiola? Sending where? Where? Gasiola, where were you to send these girls? From the U.S. to Mexico? Was this an indecent proposal, the way Chapo made an indecent proposal to the twins? to bring young girls over the border for them? Buck stops there, as far as I'm concerned. It's fuck all of y'all at that point. Unlike El Mayo, El Chapo didn't know how to do the same, or didn't have the same benefits of someone who needed the endorsement. When Rafael Caro Quintero was released by a judge's order in 2016, and within days he became a fugitive, El Chapo's son sought him out for advice on how to build a legal estate. While a member of the Guadalajara cartel, Caro Quintero invested in land and properties in Guadalajara, which over time grew to millions in value. Now, the children he had with his first wife, Maria Elizabeth Elenes Lerma, have a vast fortune. It's the least you could have done, huh? The new cattle industry of Culiacán, Nueva Industria, founded in 1988, is one of the pillars of Mayo's legal business. When it was founded, the president was Jesus Garcia Mendoza. The secretary was Fernando Iribe Picos, and the person responsible for the funds, the most important part, was Dr. Jaimes Otañez Garcia. By 1996, Chaito, her daughters, Miriam Patricia, Mónica del Rosario, and Modesta Zambada Niebla, the latter two were still minors, were already formal owners of the company, along with the Otañez Garcia himself, Iribe Picos, and Arcadio Osorio Quintero. At the shareholder meetings, Chaito has always been designated as president, according to the minutes to which Garciola gave me access. So he tried to say my mom ain't had nothing to do with this, but wrong. Your mama was just as involved as you are, Papa. The company grew rapidly. In 2003, the share capital was 20 million pesos, and in 2006, it increased to 62 million pesos. Chaito became the majority shareholder with the capital injection of more than 40 million pesos. The official address she provides in the notarial acts is 1168 Ciudad de Hermosillo Street, Las Quintas neighborhood, Culiacán. In 2007, Vicentillo's mother appointed Jose Antonio Peregrina Taboada as the company's representative. He had been the representative since 1996, and his power of attorney remains in effect. In 2009, she also appointed Humberto Castellanos Avalos, whose power of attorney also remains in effect according to the Public Property Registry. According to the latest changes, Dr. Otañez Garcia and Fernando Iribe remain partners in the company with the Mayo family. In 2011, the company, Productora y Comercializadora de Cítricos Osorio, was created on behalf of former Mayo partner Arcadio Osorio, also dedicated to agricultural, fishing, mining, and tourism activities. Just as Mayo defined the price per kilo of cocaine, marijuana, and heroin in Mexico and the United States, he also sat down at the government table, along with large transnational dairy companies, to set the price at which milk is purchased from producers. Although the new cattle ranchers of Culiacán Company had been identified by the United States government as part of the Mayo criminal network since 2007, the company participated in the Sinaloa State Dairy Commission. Decisions regarding the sector, such as federal support, are made there, and public policies for cattle ranchers are defined, such as infrastructure projects that will boost the sector, financing, and health regulations. Above all, the decision is made to set the price per liter of milk. It's hard to imagine that, with the power of El Mayo and his well-known reputation for intimidating or murdering associates, friends, and competitors, anyone could oppose his wishes on the commission. Nueva Industria, controlled by the housewife, Chaito, participated in meetings of the Sinaloa State Dairy Commission on at least 3 occasions between 2011 and 2012. The governor was Mario Lopez Valdez, the same man who had appointed Chuy, El Mayo's employee, as head of the judicial police. The arms of these people go too damn far. Their fingers are too deep in the dirt. Mexico is infected by this culture. They don't want to give them kickbacks up, man. Who has big money to get into these mixes? Drug dealers, right? But it's rare that you have one that's untouched for 50 years. A guy that's untouched like that for 50 years, he can dig his nails in. Other guys, they get arrested, shot down, taken out, lose everything. They're not building nothing. They were just building, deeper swimming pools and bigger houses, chicas, champagne. Even the housewives here were sitting at the table with huge, major corporations at their behest. It's crazy. The commission was chaired by the Secretary of Agriculture and Livestock, Juan Nicasio Guerra Ochoa. The Undersecretary of Livestock, Francisco Javier Castillo, the Director of Livestock Development, Alfonso Valdez Gaciola, and the President of the Sinaloa Regional Livestock Union, Faustino Hernandez Alvarez, who is now a local PRI deputy. He's still getting his kickback, some way, shape, form, or fashion. They are the members of the activity, such as dairy producers and milk pasteurization companies, in coordination with the state government, with the sole purpose of reaching an agreement for the payment of per liter of milk, is how the current government of Sinaloa justifies the presence of Miles' company at the commission meetings. How fortunate for the capo that the Undersecretary of Agriculture at the time was Oscar Felix Ochoa, a cousin of his father-in-law. He sent Jose Antonio Peregrina Taboada to the meetings as a representative of Nueva Industria. According to Peregrina's own public profile, he was also the manager of Lecheria Santa Monica from 1993 to 2012, although he had been publicly identified as part of El Mayo's financial network since 2007. That didn't prevent him from meeting with the state secretary of agriculture. That aguacate is rotten, bro. It's rotten. There ain't a secretary of, or a director of, or a colonel of, or lieutenant of, or officer of, or a sergeant of, anything. I'm gonna speak just as Sinaloa right now, but in Mexico, period. That ain't plugged in, bro. Milk, papas, milk, leche cortada. On December 13, 2011, Peregrina participated in the meeting alongside Lala Mazatlan of Grupo Lala, one of the largest dairy producers in the Americas, Lechera Guadalajara, and Pasteurizer of Sinaloa. The purchase price for cold milk was set to 5.70 pesos. The commission's financial report was approved, and attendees were informed of the efforts being made in Congress to protect milk producers. In 2012, the Mayo Company attended the meetings on May 23rd and June 14th, alongside companies such as Cremeria Santa Clara and Lenca Unidos Luna. There, a price increase for milk purchased from producers was agreed upon, set at 7 pesos per liter. Nueva Industria has been skillful at legitimizing itself. It was an indirect beneficiary of the board of directors of the Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Fund of the Ministry of Economy, participating in events funded by the board. One of these was organized in 2009 by the Sinaloa Science Center under the name Second SME Competitiveness Forum. And in 2010 and 2011, it was invited to the National Meeting of Food Industry Suppliers organized by Canacintra, of which it is the CNI 27 member. Again, by that time, the company was already publicly identified as part of the Sinaloa cartel leaders' money laundering network, but that didn't seem to matter. It don't matter. Everybody is willing to do something for that dollar, man. Everybody is going to kneel for that dollar coming from that dude in those companies. Period. According to information revealed by employees, Nueva Industria was at the forefront making domestic purchases and importing machinery to ensure it had the best equipment. Quote, I participated in planning the strategy for the pasteurization plant's growth, achieving a reduction in production costs during the first 3 years of the plan's implementation, despite inflation. I formed work teams to increase productivity and control in the production, packaging, and warehouse areas, says Ascensión Urquidez Lara in her public resume. She claims to have worked for Nueva Industria de Ganadores de Culiacán from 1995 to 2000, a period that represents one of the fastest growing periods in the drug trafficking business for Mayo. Curiously, she doesn't mention being a partner in the company. as appears in the company's incorporation documents. Although, according to her own information, she was studying the first years of her undergraduate degree at the Culiacan Institute of Technology from 86 to 90 at the time. Urquidez Lara, a frontwoman or partner of Mayo, claims to be linked to other companies in and outside Mexico, such as K plus S Agro Mexico, SA de CV, and or Campo Agro Mexico, SA de CV, in Zapopan, Jalisco, which sells high-quality specialty fertilizers for specialized agriculture. On at least one recorded occasion, this company exported 14,335 kilos of fertilizer to Barcelona. The merchandise left through the port of Altamira, Tamaulipas. However, Urquidez Lara fails to mention that she also appears as a partner, or maybe it's a he. Listen, the he and the she in translations goes left sometimes. He also appears as a partner in the company Construcciones de la Costa, founded in 1993 in Culiacan and dedicated to construction. He also appears as the sole director of Armadillo International Commerce, founded in Guadalajara in 2007 and dedicated to the purchase and sale of merchandise of any type for export or import, for sale within the country or abroad. Just as Mayo transports drugs across Mexican territory, the Nueva Industria company transports milk. Although it is supposed to produce it in Sinaloa, from 2011 to 2019, it obtained 104 permits from the state's Ministry of Agriculture to transport raw milk by land from Guadalajara to Culiacan. During that time, the company moved an ocean of milk, more than 12 million liters. According to Vicentillo, this same land route is key to his father's drug trafficking activities. It reminded me of the journey of Gonzalo Macho Prieto's gasoline trucks, or the frozen chicken trucks from Bachoco del Chino Antrax. The question is, did the old man transport in his own trucks? Did he transport from his own companies? Bet you he did not, because he'd much rather burn yours than his. Period. Auto Transports JYM is registered in the name of Maria Teresa Zambada Niebla, Vicentillo's sister, and ex-wife of drug trafficker Javier Diaz, who was murdered in Mexico City. His partners are her children, Javier Ernesto and Maite Diaz Zambada. Its corporate purpose is the establishment and operation of the federal public freight trucking service on routes or stretches of federal or local jurisdiction. The company purchased a fleet of 4 trailers on credit from Daimler Chrysler Services of Mexico in June 2004 for $101,000. Maria Teresa herself leased the trucks to Nueva Industria. Jose Antonio Peregrina Taboada signed the lease for the dairy company. Since Maria Teresa was also a shareholder in the company, she was leasing to herself. There it is, man. Chapter 12 and 13. Though I still felt like these chapters were a list of employees and job descriptions, I feel like just these 2 chapters spoke from the corrupt neighborhood cop all the way up to presidents of Mexico. And it just shows how deep that old man had his hands in the dirt in that country. Vicentillo seems like he believes himself, and it seems a little naive when you try to sell this picture of your family not really being involved, like your mother. And I know that's something that you want to do, is protect your mother, but to pretend we don't see through that shit is naive. Evidently, Anabel Hernández saw through it because she kept putting housewife in quotes. But these chapters were a testament to how deeply enthralled in Mexican politics, law enforcement, military, and business El Mayo was. Did we learn anything about Vicentillo? No. Do we know why he's the clown on the cover? We have our own reasons, but we ain't learned from him. But again, 2 overall better chapters than what I felt last week. And maybe I'm just frustrated with the list. Maybe you could have named this something different. Maybe you could have called it the Cartel Almanac of Vicentillo and El Mayo Zambada. But that's neither here nor there. Make sure you join me next week. Hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of these chapters. Peace.